Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Bruxelles, je t'aime. Brussels, my love. Euronews' brand new talk show all about the European capital of Brussels, the city that many love to loathe. On Brussels, my love, we break down the big stories of the week and examine what's at stake for you and for Europe. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us. Now, Brussels was rather quiet this week due to the midterm break, but it did have one much anticipated visitor. The new Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, was here on Thursday, going face to face with the heads of the European institutions. We take a look at how Italy's first female Prime Minister and her coalition government hope to steer Europe. And Twitter trolling. Since billionaire and free speech absolutist Elon Musk bought Twitter, the EU Commission has made it clear that in Europe, Twitter will have to stick to European rules. We explore whether Elon Musk's free speech plans for Twitter will clash with Brussels content regulations and what that means for us when tweeting right here in Europe. To discuss all this, I'm joined by the Belgian member of the European Parliament and co-president of the Greens European Free Alliance, Philippe Lamberts.
Hello.
Maria Demertzis, the Deputy Director of the economic think tank Bruegel.
Hello.
And Eric Maurice, the Director of the Research Centre, the Robert Schuman Foundation.
Hello.
Great to see you all. Thank you so much for being here with us in our studio. And as I said, the big news here this week was the visit of Italy's far-right Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, her first foreign trip as a head of government. Before I hear from our esteemed panel, I just want to remind our viewers who Giorgia Meloni is and what her plans are for Italy's path in Europe.
Meet Giorgia Meloni, a new face on the European stage, the first female Prime Minister of Italy. 45-year-old head of the far-right Eurosceptic party Brothers of Italy picked up 26% of the votes in September's elections. By the end of October, a coalition had been formed with her allies, Matteo Salvini's populist Lega party and centre-right Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia.
This Italy is not afraid. This Italy is ready. We are ready.
When on the campaign trail, the Brothers of Italy leader said the party would be over in Brussels. The so-called gravy train would be coming to an end, and that Italy would defend its own national interests. Now, as head of Europe's third largest economy, she's changed her tune and says Italy will be at the core of the EU and reap the €200 billion in grants and loans from the EU's pandemic recovery funds. And Italy will continue to toe the EU line on Russia. The question now on everyone's lips here in Brussels, did Giorgia Meloni come to shake things up or to reassure European partners about the role of Italy within the EU?
So, shake things up or reassure Philippe Lamberts?
Not at all. I'm glad that you called her a far-right person, because when you listen to the Italian debate, they call this a government of the centre-right. There's no centre there, there's only right and two extreme-right parties. So that's what it is. So however respectable she wants to appear, I know what the ideas of Fratelli d'Italia are. I know what the ideas of Lega are. And you might think that Berlusconi, the EPP component, so European People's Party component, is the reasonable, the adult in the room. He's a guy calling Vladimir Putin one of his best friends, you know. So, no, I'm not reassured.
And what about yourself, Eric Maurice?
Well, when I look at the pictures, the trio, a few years ago, it would have been a nightmare scenario for the EU. Berlusconi, who know who he is, he was pushed out of power a few years ago by his EU partners. Salvini, who was very controversial and very confrontational to the EU, and Fratelli d'Italia, Meloni, who was the only opponent, the only party out of the big coalition of Mario Draghi. So we thought a few years ago that this would be a nightmare for the EU. Now they want to be considered as respectable, responsible. So we have to see how it will go. But of course, it's a change of atmosphere, not only for Italy, but for the whole of the EU.
And Maria Demertzis, we heard there during her campaign, very fiery, Giorgia Meloni saying she wants to shake things up in this town. Stop that gravy train. Is she here to reassure or shake up?
Well, I think Brussels is a bit numb, waiting to see how she will manifest herself in the context of the Brussels policy arena. I am also a bit numb, just trying to see how this will play out. We've had political personalities in Europe that are off the main track, if I may call it before. So this is not the first time. Typically, when these types of characters take power, they wisen up in the sense that they follow the line, because otherwise there will be enormous pressure for the country.
Viktor Orban has wisened up?
No, that's true.
It's the other way around.
It is actually, no, that is a very good point. So, that's why the numbness, we need to wait and see how this will happen. It could go either way. If it were to go down directions of Orban, then there will be opposition, because Italy is a big country. Italy is a founder in the EU.
It's a founding member of the European Union. And of course, this is a big personal test for Giorgia Meloni this week while she was in Brussels. It's a big moment for Italy on the European stage. So as well, what are the expectations of our European partners for going forward in the European Union? Eric Maurice?
Well, if you look at the main issues these days, it's the energy crisis. So we need an agreement at EU level to limit the price of energy, to steer through the energy and climate transition. So we have to see if this government is on par with the others, going into the same directions, facilitating an agreement on the issue. Of course, there is Ukraine, the support to Ukraine, the sanctions against Russia. On this front, Giorgia Meloni has been very clear. She supports the sanctions against Russia, whatever Berlusconi says about his friend, or Salvini about their friend Vladimir Putin. And of course, the economic situation, how Italy will go with the recovery plan. How will it try to influence or block the upcoming reform of the governance of the EU?
That's the main reason, of course, she's in town this week. That's why she came this week. She came, of course, looking for money, because the energy crisis is hitting Italy and it's hitting it hard. And she suggested that during her campaign, she wanted to renegotiate those EU recovery funds, some 200 billion euros. But Philippe Lamberts, is it even possible?
But even before a visit to Brussels, she toned down that language, because she knows that she needs the money. By the way, she cannot fail to see what is happening with the Polish recovery plan that has been approved in principle, but it's very unlikely that any money will be released anytime soon, and the Hungarian plan, which has not even been approved. So I think that she knows she needs the money, and she won't want, I think, to mess with Brussels on that. She might want to mess with Brussels on other stuff, like migration.
You're an economist. Indeed. Come to that later. You're an economist, so just remind our viewers, what's at stake here for Italy?
200 billion, that's what's at stake. It would be a tactical mistake the first thing to do to try and jeopardize the 200 billion. I remind our viewers that Italy is the biggest recipient from the Next Generation EU fund, and to try and do anything that is going to jeopardize that will be a big loss for Italy.
Okay, and the European Commission probably not so hopeful to actually renegotiate that. Something, of course, that was discussed carefully and a long time with, of course, her predecessor, Mario Draghi. But Philippe Lamberts, I know it was a quiet week in Brussels this week, but around the Parliament, what was the mood like around her visit?
It depends whom you're talking to. Of course, in my group, the Greens, we are absolutely not naive about who these people are. I think that you would see the same attitude from the left-wing groups, but when you talk with European People's Party, Ursula von der Leyen's party, but also Manfred Weber's party, there you find what I call complacency. So they claim that they are going to be the ones, being the junior partner of the coalition, the smallest, that they are going to be the ones reasoning Meloni and Salvini for them not to make stupid mistakes. I think that EPP is on the verge of losing its compass. By
EPP
agreeing
on the verge of losing its compass. Would you agree there, Maria Demertzis?
Well, I mean, there's certainly heterogeneity now in EPP. I think that's what what we observe now these days. So agreements on policy is going to be also very difficult.
And just to remind our viewers, the EPP, of course, is the European People's Party. It's the biggest European family. It's the European centre-right group.
At the moment.
But one thing, of course, that we like to look at is body language. And I'd like to just show you now a tweet that Emmanuel Macron, the French president, put out just recently when he was in Rome. He was there on a trip, and he used part of that trip to visit the new Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. And he put out a tweet saying that we will work as neighbours. We will continue to work with Italy. We owe that to the people and the young people. And the meeting with Giorgia Meloni went in that very direction. But of course, Giorgia Meloni is known for her ultra-conservative values. They're very, very different to those of the French President Macron. Giorgia Meloni's slogan was God, country and family. So, Eric Maurice, do you think that they will collide?
Well, they have some common interests on economic governance, the reform of the Stability Pact, you know, the rules for budgetary policies in the EU. It's a long-term project or a long-term ambition of France and Italy to try to turn Germany and other Nordic countries towards more flexibility in budgetary policies. So they have this common interest. Maybe on migration, I don't know what kind of a line they can have together to try to help a compromise, because Italy needs a resolution, an agreement on migration, on migratory policy. So they can have some, it's only interests. They do not share many ideological views, but they have interest as countries from the south of Europe. They have interest in terms of energy policy. They have interest in terms of economic recovery. So they need to talk, and that's what Macron was signaling.
They need to talk, and they will be talking a lot, because Giorgia Meloni will be showing up a lot in this town of Brussels. She'll also be coming to the December EU summit. Who will she be clubbing up with when she sits down at that summit?
Well, this remains to be seen. Just a word on what you said about Macron. I think that deep down, Macron is a right-wing person. And so, yes, they may have differences, and they certainly have some differences. But when I look at the attitude of Macron on the migration front, for instance, I don't think that Italy will find that very useful, because actually France is trying to do the least possible in terms of solidarity. When you listen to the minister who is working for Macron on that front, he's pretty much a very hardliner on all these issues. This won't help.
We will have
Italy.
to ask the French president himself. We'll have to invite him on the show and ask him himself.
Oh,
Deep
yeah,
down,
sure.
is he really a right-winger?
Yeah, yeah.
But let's go back to our economist around the table, Maria Demertzis. And you described earlier to our viewers what exactly was at stake for Italy. But remember, during the campaign, Giorgia Meloni, she campaigned on bread and butter issues. Will she be able to deliver on these promises she made to those voters that are relying on her now?
I think it would be very difficult to antagonize Europe on the big issues. We talked about fiscal reform. This is an agenda that is very difficult to move in Brussels, and therefore coming in and pushing that in ways that can go in very different directions than planned is not going to be easy. And I actually think that they do have, with Macron, they have a common agenda on a number of issues. Yeah. That said, it's going to be an awkward partnership. It's more a partnership of convenience rather than a partnership of love.
A partnership of convenience.
But if you wanted progress on that, indeed, Draghi was a person that reassured the frugal countries more than Meloni does. I think that Draghi has basically the same agenda as Macron in terms of reform of the fiscal rules, but he was a person, I think, better able to sell that in Brussels. For her, she will be looked at with suspicion from the frugal side. That said, when I talk with the European Commission and I look at what they have in the pipeline in terms of fiscal rules reform, I think that it goes pretty much in a direction that should help Italy and France and Europe, by the way, because, well, this debt brake obsession that the Germans have is not really helping Germany either. So
Philippe
we need that
Lamberts, on
reform.
those fiscal rules, we'll have all our eyes here next Wednesday on the European Commission when they come out with a big announcement regarding those fiscal rules. We'll report it here for you on Euronews. Now, as I said, the big story was Giorgia Meloni's visit here in Brussels this week. It was also the main topic on the headlines. It was splashed across all the Italian newspapers this week. But I wonder, did normal Italians, know that she was in Brussels? Did they even care? Our Italian correspondent, Giorgia Orlandi, has been on the streets of Rome this week asking locals if she thinks the Italian government should confront or embrace the European Union. Take a look.
I think Meloni has to embrace the EU. Going against it is not a wise thing to do.
She has to respect the EU and she has to carry on collaborating with it. And she has to engage herself because Italy is one of the founding members of the EU.
Giorgia Meloni should defend the country's interest in the EU in the same way as previous governments already did in the past in the name of a pro-European spirit. But I doubt she will do that, although I remain hopeful.
I think it's time to be firm, and that's because of a number of reasons. That said, we should not fight against the EU, but rather try to reach a compromise with it. It's clear that this is what politics is about in the end, but despite that, we have to display a more inflexible attitude.
Meloni has to embrace the EU in order to avoid ending up being isolated from the rest of the group.
Our Rome correspondent George Orlandi reporting for us there. Eric Maurice, a reaction there to that video?
Well, it's interesting because we would expect something more hard from voters who voted for this coalition of right-wing and far-right. But maybe what Maria said about the interest of these 200 billion euros that Italy needs to for the recovery, for the reforms, for the industry. They know they need that. They have this energy crisis. They have, I think, 12% of inflation last month. So they know that they need to stay in the group in the EU.
Well, they're certainly keeping an eye on everything going on, right? Not just back in Italy, but here in Brussels. Another story, of course, and another issue that would be huge for the government, the coalition government of Giorgia Meloni, is her role vis-à-vis the war in Ukraine and the EU stance on Russia. Will she stick to the same line as her predecessor Mario Draghi did?
Well, I think so. At least she has been constant on that. She has no picture of hers posing proudly with Vladimir Putin, while her two coalition partners were very proud and are still proud of their friendship with Vladimir Putin. So at least in terms of her track record, she has been constant, and she's the boss. She has the biggest party.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, but she needs to bring some continuity here. And what Mario Draghi has achieved in the past few months that he's been working on this was tremendous in terms of advancing the agenda on the Russian issue. If she came in and broke away from this, that would be a total detriment both to Italy but also to the cause. That would be splitting Europe down the middle, would not be a good thing for the war.
And Eric Maurice, how will she keep Silvio Berlusconi in line when it comes to his attitude towards Russia, and of course Matteo Salvini, who we've discussed as well?
Well, of course, they are two very difficult people to manage. Well, Berlusconi is not in the government, so maybe it's easier. We have Tajani in the government, maybe who has in mind the interest of his interest and the interest of the country.
Tajani, former president of the European Parliament, close ally of Silvio Berlusconi, and now the foreign minister of Italy.
Exactly, so he can have some influence in this government more than Berlusconi. Salvini is another problem because he's in the government. He's probably trying to have some kind of revenge over Meloni because her party did much better than his party in the election, and he still has ambitions. So I think for Meloni, the problem is more La Lega, the party of Salvini, more than Berlusconi himself and Forza Italia.
And one thing that Brussels and the institutions here have been very proud of is they have all stuck to the line. They have stayed united when it comes to dealing with Russia, but we are seeing cracks. We've seen cracks for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, come on, Viktor Orban. Well, actually, he never used his veto right on sanctions, but you cannot say that he's towing the line on Putin. I mean, he's openly appearing.
What should be done about that? Why is he getting away with that?
Well, I think that what should be done is what is being done, actually. The only thing that Orban will respect is if we start withdrawing financial support to Hungary. And of course, now he's making placards in Hungary saying that basically it's European sanctions that are making Hungary poorer. But actually, Hungary as an economy cannot survive outside of its hinterland, which is the European Union single market. And he has to remember that you cannot be a member of a club in order to just enjoy the advantages without fulfilling your obligations. And it's been years that Orban has not fulfilled the obligations.
And yet I see an important risk here. I remind you that Europe still has not imposed sanctions on gas in from Russia. It is Russia that has stopped providing gas to us. That means that there is a possibility, and here the issue of Hungary comes back to the fore, of actually breaking with that and changing our views and buying gas from Russia again.
Yeah.
There will be no legal framework for opposing that.
I'm going to stop you there because that is all we have time for on that topic. But don't go anywhere, because after the break, we'll be looking at the battle brewing between regulators here in Brussels and the new owner of Twitter, Elon Musk. See you soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, with me, Maeve McMahon. Now, as you've probably seen, Elon Musk is the new owner of Twitter. And what got tongues wagging this week in Brussels was the little Twitter theatrics between the billionaire and the French EU Commissioner Thierry Breton. After Elon Musk moved into the Twitter headquarters, he tweeted that he had freed the bird, i.e. Twitter's logo. And the EU Commissioner for the Internal Market tweeted right back to say, "The bird will fly by EU content moderation rules." Even Ryanair joined in then with their 2 pence, tweeting, "It'll never take off." So first question to you all, how much time do you spend on Twitter? Maria?
Well, we spend some time, and importantly, it's part of our strategy on the media side. So we use Twitter very importantly to communicate our work. So yes, we will be watching.
too, right, as a politician?
My staff, yes. Myself, no.
Oh. And yourself, Eric Maurice?
I spend too much time on Twitter, but it's a useful tool for
but
work.
This is the bubble speaking to the bubble. I'm really fed up of that, because you can't have a life if you start following these things. If I want to know what people think, I can call them. I listen to them. I watch news, but I don't need to be permanently watching these messages. Frankly, no.
So if you all had to pay for Twitter, would you still stay on it to have your verification? Maria?
Absolutely not.
Eric?
No, I don't think so.
And Philippe?
That's interesting, because that's the thing that made Musk sympathetic to me. Because I do believe that these services, Facebook, Twitter, etc., should be offered with a fee option. That you that you can pay for it with your money instead with your personal data. I think that everyone should have the option, indeed, to say, okay, hands off my personal data. You just use my money, a modest fee, and then you can go with it. This I like, but this won't make me use Twitter more. Because indeed, I believe that the world is more complex than just the few sentences that you can put on Twitter. The world is indeed a very, very complex place. And what we were discussing, of course, here is this spat, this battle brewing between the the Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton. Now, they've already met. But let's find out more about that battle. And here now from Jennifer Baker. She's a tech journalist and Twitter expert, known here as the Brussels Geek in Brussels. And she follows European digital policy carefully. So she's keeping a very close eye on the Brussels versus Musk Twitter case. Take a listen.
What has to be decided is what's classed as a very large online platform, because these sorts of bodies or companies will have to contain themselves even tighter to the rules. There will be a surface level, an extra level of obligations put on them. The sanctions, well, we don't know how much some of these big tech companies see those sanctions as just the cost of doing business. But Elon Musk very famously tried to get the price down on Twitter. He's already considering charging users a €20 or $20 subscription to keep their verified blue badge with the white tick. So he may not want to adopt practices that will cost him money on a daily basis. But the other option is that he may just not care and decide to go for a free-for-all. He's told the EU lawmakers that he will adhere to it, but it does remain to be seen. If he turns it into the free-for-all Wild West hellscape that some of us fear, the other option is that users might just leave before it even gets to a court case, because these things take time. But of course, that would be pretty bad for democracy and the much vaunted free speech that Elon Musk himself says he loves.
Jennifer Baker there, so thank you so much to her. And the question, of course, what will happen next? Will we see a major clash, or is this just a storm in a teacup? Maria?
Well, we need to see. I think you need to allow for time for the new Twitter, as it were, to develop. But I think we've heard at the core of Europe's DNA is personal data, is personal information. This is what Europe will protect, and make no mistake, we will do that.
And who can remind our viewers about the rules, exactly these rules that will come in 2024?
Say again?
Can you just remind our viewers about these very rules that will come
Well,
in?
indeed, there's two major pieces of legislation that have been adopted, the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act. And these two basically make the big operators like Facebook, Google, etc. They cannot abuse their power to basically favor their services over those of their competitors using the same platform. That's one point. And second, they will get a degree of responsibility for what is put on their platforms in terms of illegal content. And so, the time of free-for-all are gone. And indeed, I would pay attention because, there was this comment about sanctions. Well, look at what Google has been fined already by the European Union, and most of these fines have held up in court. And I'd like to remind Elon Musk that Google is profitable. Twitter is not. And he's spending zillions of dollars to buy a platform that is loss-making, right? And if you were to add the cost of possible fines to those losses, not sure that his bankers and his financiers will like it very much.
And we've already seen this week, which struck my eye, was people leaving Twitter. Established, respected journalists that are based all across the continent of Europe already leaving Twitter, regardless of their massive followings. Eric Maurice, your opinion on that?
Yeah, probably whatever Musk thinks, he has to take into account the image of his new company. And in terms of image, if people leave because they don't trust what he's doing, because you have too much disinformation, too much fake news and this kind of things, it's not good for the image, and it will be more difficult for him to make business, to make money with it. And Europe, I think it's like more than 80 billion users for Twitter. So it's quite huge in terms of business, which probably is the main argument to keep Musk within the framework of his obligations.
Well, Elon Musk is planning to meet the Commissioner Thierry Breton very soon, and he's promised that he will abide by those rules. But Marie Demertzis, could we see a situation where we have different rules for users of Twitter here in Europe than users across the pond?
Well, I think that will be difficult. I mean, the digital firms are cross-border firms, so you need one set of rules, otherwise things get very, very complicated and very difficult to enforce if you just start changing jurisdictions. So I think, no, we will have one set of rules, and this is why the big digital firms are looking in Brussels very closely, because they know these are the rules that will have to hold across the world.
Well, they will have to clear the highest hurdle of them all. So even if we don't coordinate with the US or China or whatever, since they are global operators, they will need to meet the highest standards.
That's right.
And
that's correct.
Well, at the moment, these are the European Union standards.
But I think that we need to give a little bit more time to this issue, simply because this is a network industry. A very big number of people has to leave Twitter before Twitter collapses. So the 1 and 2 people who leave, of course, that's a signal. But I mean, I think we need a little bit of time before we pass judgment.
And some arguing that the Elon Musk takeover will, of course, be a renaissance for free speech.
Well, give me a break.
What kind of free speech?
Exactly. I think that's
what kind of free speech? You have to look and to read. He gave an interview recently. He had lunch with the Financial Times. Read that interview. When you look at how he despises the democratic institutions, the guy believes that billionaires know better what is good for society than democratic institutions. Sorry, in that sense,
we'll come back to that.
He's an adversary.
Brussels, my love, thank you so much. It's a story we'll keep an eye on. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. And stay with us here on Euronews. Hello there, this is Brussels, my love, with me, Maeve McMahon, where we're taking a look back at the big European stories of the week. And one story that caught our eye this week was something that happened on Halloween. How did you all spend Halloween? Did you go trick-or-treating, Eric?
No, I'm too old for that.
You too old? Did you?
No, I actually went to the graveyards to pass flowers, I think, which is a very big tradition to do on the day.
Absolutely. Well, the reason I ask you this funny, absurd question is because I want to show you a clip now of how some people marked Halloween this week and how others recently spent time in a museum. Take a look.
What is worth more, the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people.
Protesters there from Just Stop Oil spraying orange paint from fire extinguishers onto the Bank of London. Your reaction? I mean, is that vandalism or is that activism? Philippe Lamberts?
It is both. It is both, but I understand the anger of people. We have had evidence for the last half century, and that was a Club of Rome report 1972, right? Half a century, we have had scientific evidence that our economic model will breach the planetary boundaries. What allows this planet to be called home by humanity. And when you look at policy making, it has been totally deaf to that scientific evidence for half a century. Now we are starting to move, and nowhere near fast enough. So I'm not an advocate of violence, make no mistake about that, but we are now in the realm of non-violent civil disobedience. And I really don't know what, the bulk of policymakers need to take the hard turn that we need to take, because now the time for smooth transition is already past. Now we need hard changes.
Let's hear from you. Of course, this has been for over 30 days. They have been doing these demonstrations towards COP27, of course.
That's right. The time, good cause, obviously good cause, unavoidably good cause, but a very bad way of doing that. It's very shocking to see. The first time I saw the painting of Van Gogh being vandalized this way, I thought to myself, what do you achieve by destroying?
Well, the screen was vandalized, actually, not the painting.
Well, yes, but Eric, let's bring you in as well to get your stance.
I think when you attack art, you attack culture and civilization, which is the last limit before violence and, just human not behaving with civilization to other human beings. So I think it's symbolically a limit that should not be broken.
But as Philippe Lamberts said...
You mean getting violent? I totally agree with you.
Taking culture as a target for political...
Frankly, look at the violence of this economic system. This economic system is not figuratively, it is literally killing people, human beings, it is killing animals, it is killing living beings. I mean, this is violence. And what I don't tolerate is that people just smearing a glass before a painting, right, is taking, this is horrible, but when you have an economic system that is literally killing people, these are the undesired effects of the system. Come on. I mean, violence is happening as we speak, right? But not from the activists.
Just briefly, this weekend, Sunday, COP27 will kick off. Very briefly. Is there still a point in having COP27?
Oh, absolutely. There's always a point in moving this agenda.
And I think it shows something else. It's that it's okay to have this kind of act in Europe, but Europe is only a tiny limit, a tiny part of the CO2 emissions and a tiny part of what could be done. So if there was this kind of demonstration in other parts of the world, I could also understand. But it's an easy target to go into.
Of course. We live in democracies. I mean, in China, you can't do this.
That is all, right? I'm afraid, gentlemen, that we have time for. But we will come back to that topic next week because, of course, COP27 is kicking off in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching us, and see you soon here on Euronews.